Hey, Lauren, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. So we're going to be doing some double checking to make sure everything's going live and make sure everything's working out. And while we're double checking that, I want to make sure it's all working great. It is. We're working. We're live. So that's great. Okay, awesome. So today I am with Jordan. For those of you who do not know, this is Jordan Bradley. He is our director of photography here at Paul the Last Apostle. And today's the first day I've ever gotten to meet him. So this is so much fun. And but before we get started the interview, just like I've done the other ones with our actors, I want to give a short introduction of who Jordan is. And he's a pretty awesome guy. So I want to share with you. He's from Texas. We have so many people, Jordan, from Texas. I think like our whole our whole team is almost from Texas. But you were born and raised in Houston. You currently live
Yep.
in the Woodlands now with your wife, your two kids,
Mhm.
and one on the way. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So boy or girl, or do we know?
We don't know yet. We're going to find out. It's just not time yet. My oldest child's a boy, and my youngest is a girl, uh,
Okay.
3.5 and 1.5. And they are crazy. They're a handful. So
I got you. Yeah, so I have two girls, and they're older now, but they were a year and a half apart. So I totally understand that stage. So, but congratulations on the new one. But you have
thanks.
been in the film industry for 13 years, and
Yep.
for people who don't know, this is what I ask before we get started. Like, hey, what did you do before? And he's always done this. And there's some really
Uh,
cool projects you've done, Jordan. I was looking at your IMDb profile, and you've done some really cool stuff. But the two I want to mention that people might be familiar with is Crazy Texas and then the Among the Stars docuseries that's featured on Disney Plus, which I did not know existed. So when I saw that, I was like, my kids and I were so going to watch this. This sounds so
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to tell me a little bit about that because I want to hear like how you got roped into that because that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll start with Among the Stars. Among the Stars was, I mean, it's just a documentary. A gentleman that I know named Ben from England, just like he's always been obsessed with NASA and astronauts, and that was like one of his dreams was to shoot something about it. I forget what his big show is, but he has like a big show that he created.
Mhm.
Um, and everything on I think it's on Apple. And this was just kind of like one of his little pet projects. And we shot the whole documentary maybe over 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, and it was really like, I mean, it's a very laborious thing to do a documentary. It's a lot of hours of shooting things that are not going to be used and really just like waiting for the good moments to happen. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a really cool experience for me personally. I
Mhm.
always tell people it's kind of like the best VIP behind the scenes experience you can ever get to go do something like that. I've been to every NASA facility in the United States.
That's so cool.
I didn't do Europe. There was a European DP. It was just made a lot more sense. But the European DP got to go to like CERN and Russia for the some of the launches and the landings. Our astronauts at that time were going up on what are called Suez rockets, which are the Russian rockets.
Right.
But I've seen like SpaceX stuff, and I've gone to like launches for resupply missions for the International Space Station. I learned about this thing called the alpha magnetic spectrometer and all
Wow.
this cool
That's so
stuff,
cool.
and got to spend time with people like Chris Cassidy, who's kind of the main astronaut. Who, I mean, astronauts are crazy. The guy's got like he's not like a full medical doctor, but he's what's like considered like a field doctor.
Mhm.
So he could do surgery on you. He's a Navy SEAL, and he
Wow.
has a PhD. I don't remember what it was in, like mathematics or something like that. And I mean, every astronauts like that. They all are like have done 10 things, and it's like you're not even 40. How did you do that?
That
And
is,
so
yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, yeah. So that
Like,
was a wonderful experience. Really cool, super small crew. A documentary like
mhm,
that's like 3 or 4 people, and
mhm.
it's usually pretty full time, like 5 days a week. So yeah, that was kind of that. And then Crazy Texas actually hasn't come out yet.
Oh, it hasn't. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that is a film that my buddy Francis and I, Francis just got the bug and was like, "Man, I have to make a feature, and I need to do it like in the next 6 months." And I was like, what? Do you have a script? And he was like, yes, I wrote it, a couple days ago. Like, here it is. And like, this is not going to happen. That's crazy. It's literally insane. Which was part of the reason why we called it Crazy Texas. But that also gets into the story a little bit too. But yeah, it's a feature film. It's a psychological thriller with a little bit of horror elements, and it's really about like good versus evil. And it was a wild ride. We shot it all in 9 days. Francis financed basically the whole thing, and we are very close to being finished. Like we have a trailer and stuff like that, but
Okay.
we're picture locked on the film, just waiting on like visual effects and music and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. But yeah, you've done that, but what people also might like, so you do all this cool film stuff,
mhm.
which you alone doing something for, I just think it's cool that you have something on Disney Plus. I don't know why. I just think I was like, that is so
Yeah,
cool. And then hearing, of course, all the things you learned and saw and witnessed, but like you also like to rock climb in your your free time, and you like to
yes.
work on cars, and so you're a guy that uses his creativity but yet seem to like use his hands too. So that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love being a director of photography, is because it is like it's a very creative job, but it's very
Mhm.
hands-on.
Yeah.
And I like to combine those two things, like mechanical skills and creativity. So
Yeah, that's so cool. And then the other thing I think is really neat is that when in your free time, which I don't know how you have any, but
I
being
don't
a
have nearly as
dad,
much as I used to.
yeah, with a
Yeah,
dad, and then as busy as it sounds like you are, you like to help Christian organizations out, and you try to help them in their production, and you currently are serving as an artist in at Stonebridge Church in the Woodlands, and that's cool to
yeah,
me because so before I was part of this project with Paul, my husband and I, we were both on staff at a church, and I was the creative pastor, but I did all production stuff. So
mhm,
oh, I could totally talk shop with Jordan. I mean, you probably know, way things
yeah.
over my head, but well, I was like kind of geeking out a little bit. So
Oh,
this,
cool, cool. Yeah,
yeah. So we'll have to chat sometime
I
later
would love
about all
to.
that
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
So, but that's so cool. So, and you also work closely with Bible Study Fellowship, which people have heard. I mean, I know I've heard
yeah.
about Bible Study Fellowship.
Yeah, BSF's one of my big clients. I'm good friends with their Markham director, I guess is his title. I don't really know what
Uh-huh.
that means, but basically he's like, and to me, he's like their creative lead for like all kinds of video stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so usually once a year, I work with them and I shoot all their like Bible study videos.
Yes.
And the videos are mostly for their leaders,
Mhm.
but Bible Study Fellowship is like a crazy organization. Like they're globally and they have tons of people. So basically, usually for like a whole week, I'll go and shoot these videos, and then afterwards I edit them. But it's usually the foremost scholar on a book of the Bible breaking
Yes.
down the whole book, and usually there's 30 lessons or something like
Mhm.
that, and it's really a challenge. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, right? Like it's a scholar like breaking it down. So like we'll do all this work and light and build sets and get creative and stuff. And um, at the end of the day, the hardest task is always like to to stay awake and keep your attention whenever you're doing 10 hours of a guy just talking about like all these intricate details about like the writing style of a book or something, and it's like it's a really challenging thing, but it's really cool also because
Yeah.
um, if I had to spend a lot of time doing something, like I would want to choose that. It may not be what I choose out of like uh, like if I have all these options, I'd probably want to take a break and go do something else. But it's really the best thing that I could spend my time doing. So that's a really cool thing for me.
Yeah. I like that. I think what want to honor, when you're behind the camera and when you're editing things, um I think it's always such an honor. I know for me, when I've done testimonial videos or whatever it is, it's like you have this like you're the one helping shape the story,
Hmm.
and so and a lot of times, especially when it's Bible or Christian based or faith based, like like the weight that it carries, and the fact that you have that honor to like be the one, to edit, to film, to tell the
Yeah.
story. I definitely can resonate with that 100%. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You've always been in the film industry. Like when I asked you, you're like, yeah, I've done a few, like, like the college kid jobs or the, high school
Yeah.
jobs, but this has been your career. And so what led you
Hmm.
to film? Like what made you passionate to say, this is what I'm meant to do?
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard for me to always think back into like those college years and stuff when I was
Mm.
forming, the path that I would take. But I think I was just always attracted to art. I was never really like a sciences kind of person. It just never really evoked passion in me.
Uh-huh.
And in college, I tried a lot of things, and photography was something that I was really attracted to. But I just thought it was too just one dimensional. Um, and um, Film, I just thought was amazing. Like just the fact that you can't do it alone is something that really attracted me to the process of making a film or um, some kind of narrative story that appears on in video
Mhm.
because I don't know. I'm a person that like I'm not particularly self motivated. I do a lot better when there's other people and when I'm under pressure. So it's just a
Mhm.
really natural attraction for me to that, combined with the aspects of photography that I really liked. So
Yeah, I love that a lot. Maybe as you're thinking back, what was the first project, like maybe the more significant thing you ever did, and you were kind of like it kind of sealed the deal for you, maybe?
yeah, yes. So actually, a weird link to it's how I know the guy at Bible Study Fellowship. But there's a director that went to the same college that I went to, Brandon
Mm.
Dickerson, and in my junior year, he came and spoke in one of our classes, and I immediately went up to him afterwards and asked him. Oh, sorry, he was in town in Waco, Texas, and he was
Mhm.
shooting a feature film. But I immediately went up to him after class and said, "Hey, I want to be an intern on your film." And he was like, "Well, we're not going to have like unpaid interns or anything, but let me see if I can get you a job. Like, what do you want to do?" And I told him camera department, 100%. So I got on that. He got me on, and we became not really like good friends or anything because he was so much older than me. But we maintained a relationship, and
Yeah.
that experience was like incredible for me. We shot on 35 millimeter. The DP and I got along really well, and it just kind of sparked this in the industry people call it the bug, but just like
Yeah.
this excitement to be on a film set. And in a film set, like a movie, is really like camp. It's like summer camp. Like you go and you have so much fun, and you literally spend almost every waking hour of your day with other people
Mhm.
working. Usually you work 12-hour days. So it's like you get off and you eat dinner and you try to relax and then you go to bed. And so I just fell in love with like the adventure of it and the lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. So
That's so cool. I love that you said that it feels like summer camp. I
yeah.
think I can envision that, like, because I listen to actors. I interviewed several of our actors from whether it was like when we were doing the pilot episode or now, and listening to them be like, we come together for such a time and you're so close knit, and then you just kind
Mhm.
of go your separate ways because
Yeah.
of life. So I imagine it'd be like summer camp. That's how it was when you were kids, or you would go to
Yeah.
summer camp, see people, you'd be really close to them, and then you kind of disperse.
Yeah. It's
But
a it's
saying
a
all that,
strange,
yeah,
bittersweet experience.
I'm sure it is. Saying all
Yeah.
that though, I did see, just looking at your IMDb, like you
Mhm.
have been working in the past. Like, this is not one of my questions, but I
Mhm.
had sent to you. But it seems like you've been tied to Mark Isaacs, who's one of our producers on
Yeah.
this series. And so I'm interested, like, how has that been? Like I guess the going away, but you coming back together. I mean, I'm sure it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Mark's somebody that like I regularly collaborate with,
Mhm.
and him and I have a great relationship. We've got probably, including Paul the Last Apostle, probably like 3 or 4 projects, just kind of like out waiting on the wings. That if they click and they go, we'll work together on those. But I love Mark. I love. I mean, it's one of my favorite things is when you get to work with those those regular people, you form a relationship, and it becomes a lot more just just natural, right? Because you know everybody, and it's like secondhand just to talk to them. But yeah, Mark, I've done a documentary that never came out actually on abortion, which was cool with the lady named Kristen. Oh, I'm blanking on her last name, but she's a huge like abortion activist, and she runs a big organization that is called the March for Life,
Mhm.
or maybe that's not the organization's name, but they put on the March for Life. They're like one of
Okay.
the big like organizations that push it. But yeah, I've worked with Mark a lot. I like him. He's a great guy. Also a Christian. He used to live in San Antonio. Now he lives
Mhm.
up in Buffalo, New York. So yeah, he's wonderful.
Yeah, I just think it's cool because I would think the rapport's there, the
Hmm.
expectations there, you kind of know what he's going to look for, so I'm
Yeah,
sure that helps. That helps, I'm
yeah.
sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Mark's somebody that I'll call, sometimes once a week and just like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think?
Mhm.
Thoughts, whatever. And he'll give me his insight, and vice versa. And he's always a helpful guy in that sense. So,
That's awesome. Well, I just thought it was really cool because when I saw your all's names together, I was like, oh, okay. So like they have a rapport and that has to
yeah.
help, for sure. So for anyone watching today that might not know what the director of photography is, do you mind giving us like a short overview? Because I'll totally honesty,
Yeah.
I have no, other than doing stuff for my church and like self-taught and all this stuff, I did not know a director of photography. I had to look it up. I'm
Yeah.
like, what is this? So I was like, well, if I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people don't know. So if you don't mind sharing what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people think, like if I say that, they think cameraman, right? That's the
Yes.
layman's term for director of photography. But really, like it's more than that in terms of you're really a director in terms of like all the lighting, all the cameras, and then something that we call grip. And the grip department is it's kind of a weird one, but they modify light, so they'll soften it or
Mhm.
shape it or you know try to keep light off things. They'll put up like
Right.
big black overheads of 40 by 40, to make shade or something like that. And then they also help move the camera. So anytime the camera does a move like on a dolly or a
Mhm.
crane, the grip department's responsible for that. And the director of photography really oversees those departments and tries to help them move together, under his vision. So like on set, usually, um, you go through and you first on set we always block, right, so the actors show us what's going to happen, and the director says, yeah, that's exactly what we want, and the director usually leaves and goes with the actors to prep more of the
Mhm.
acting side of things, and the DP starts lighting it. So he'll light it, direct all the lighting department, modify all the light, set up cameras and movements and stuff, and then depending on the style of the DP and the budget of the show,
Mhm.
um, the DP either when things are being filmed either operates the A camera or in sometimes in an ideal world will sit there at monitors and watch multiple cameras and sit right next to the director, and that way the director can say like, hey, I don't really like this, can we change that to this, and then the DP will give the marching orders to the appropriate people. So
That's so cool because I think
yeah.
it's really neat. So we've talked about a lot when I've interviewed actors. It's hard not to talk about The Chosen because I feel like it's given us such a framework of
Hmm.
what biblical series could look like, right? And so it has been neat for me to look behind the scenes and see all the things and not recognize that the director's kind of directing the actors, and he does have an
Yes.
oversight, but you are really the specialist as a DP, the director of photography, to say, okay, this is the best way to use lighting, and you work together, right? But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, like you both kind of are in charge of your own thing. And so I think
Yeah.
that's really neat that, like you were sharing earlier, it is a team, it's a collaboration. And I
Hmm.
think, I'm sure when things feel right and they come together, it has to have that kind of like playing. I don't know if you're musically inclined, but like if I've ever played instruments and you're playing in a band and all of a sudden it comes together, it's this beautiful thing. I'm sure it feels like that with you
Yeah.
guys on the behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. And really it's all the cool thing about it, and it's what I love about being director of photography rather than directing, is I get to serve somebody. And it takes a lot of people serving one person, which is the director, to create like a masterpiece film, which is so cool. And usually a lot of that kind of stuff, like I say, I manage all those people, and we talk about like lighting style and stuff like that. But in pre-production, the director would give references and things like that,
Mhm.
and say, hey, let's try to make it look more like this. And my
Okay.
job is really to get inside his head and figure out what is the image he wants, and then
Mhm.
I'm supposed to produce that, right? So
Which is so neat because I just think that's the coolest ever. Like I just do. I don't know. I just think it's so neat that you can say, "Hey, what's your vision? Let me help make your vision a reality." And you use your creativity that the Lord's given you and it comes out through that way, but yet you're still serving. And
yeah,
I just think that's really cool. Super cool.
thanks.
So, with all your stuff in the background, like what I haven't shared is that you do commercials, maybe one or two a month. Like you've done features, you've done
Hmm.
all these things. What's been your favorite genre?
Oh, I don't know if I'd say I have a favorite genre or
Okay.
like format, but
Okay.
I'm really attracted to just like narrative stories. Like
Mm.
um, commercials are okay. I mean, I enjoy commercials, one, because usually they pay a lot more money. So that's a really nice thing. So I can
Right.
work less and gain more money. They're a little bit less of a passion project and more of a job. But
Right.
also they're exciting because it changes my office, so to speak,
Hmm.
which is always a nice thing, just to see something different and do that. But really just storytelling, like narrative storytelling is what I'm really attracted to. And ever since like streaming, narrative storytelling's really been like kind of flipped on its head. I think it's changing again right now what people desire and want. But
Hmm.
films used to be, the untouchable pinnacle of narrative storytelling. I still think they are as a format, just to be able to sit down and see a whole story in 2 hours is like a
Right.
very interesting thing. But they're a film is kind of like a short story versus like a novel is like a television show
Hmm.
now, and television shows have really caught up in terms of like art
Hmm.
to feature films. So it can be so many different things. It could be a feature, it could be episodic TV, it could be miniseries. I just love like storytelling. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. And I was thinking about this today. I was because chosen season 4 episode 4 came out last night and I was watching it and
Mhm.
I just started thinking about because they were talking about arcs and all the things I never would have thought about. Like I'm just a consumer, but now I'm in this side with film. I'm just seeing things.
Yeah.
I share this like I'm seeing things so different now. And but I think it's interesting because now we can binge watch shows.
Hmm.
So I can sit down if I wanted to. I could sit
Yeah.
down and watch a whole not that I should, but
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
sit down and watch 8 hours of a show and you can see
Hmm.
it from beginning to end. Whereas in the past it was like, well, I got to tune in at this time and then I got to wait a week for it to come out and I feel like that's going to probably change, you know,
Yeah.
series, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
so I think it would challenge writers honestly to be a little bit tighter about like not leaving this out or well what happened to that character, they just disappeared, like because people
Yeah.
know now because you can go back and watch them in sequence too. So I
Hmm.
think I think that's maybe one of the reasons why we're seeing it change.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. I think there used to be this like whole like 20 episode a season
Mhm.
standard for television kind of thing. And now that's crazy. Nobody's like, I'm not watching 20 episodes of a show.
Right.
Um, like get to the point. I want to know, the story. So yeah, it's kind of weird. It's all evolving and changing. And I think in some ways people want better high quality features more than they did like 4 or 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
and I feel like then they really wanted more television.
Mhm.
But I think in some ways people are moving away from that right now. I think it's just like it just ebbs and flows what's popular. But I think features are becoming more prominent right now, and you see like theater resurgence is happening again and
Yes.
stuff like that. So, and
Yes.
actually, The Chosen is they
Yeah.
do incredible in theaters. So,
Yeah. I think it's something about let's be real, like COVID changed everything. And so
hmm.
when you were told you couldn't go to the theater, like I think the fact that like you couldn't go when you wanted to go and now we're like, well, I can go
Yeah,
to the theater. I'm gonna go. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
interesting how that plays with a human psyche for sure.
it
But so
does.
Yeah. So what drew you to Paul though? Like what brought you to this project? I would love to hear your story of how you got here.
Yeah, I think it's really two people, Mark Isaacs and then also Ulysses Larramondi.
Hmm.
So I know both of them personally. Um, Ulysses knows my father really well. My dad's a pastor, and I've probably known Ulysses like off and on for like maybe 15 or 20 years.
Wow.
He runs a restaurant called Eden's Cafe, and I think we were there within a couple years of it opening.
Hmm.
And my dad's church is really close to Eden's Cafe, and so I've just known him for a long time. And I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when he really got serious about acting and stuff, my dad would tell me about it, and I'd be like, "Oh, I don't like that's cool. I don't know, like Ulysses or like really like him as an artist or anything or what he's into." I was probably more of a cynical person then too, just as far as art was
Hmm.
concerned. Um, so I think I think since then I've really had like a really big resurgence in terms of, or I guess not resurgence, just uh, like a desire to do things that are Christian. Um, and I think some of that is just part of growing up and children and marriage and realizing like if I'm going to tell stories, I want to tell the stories that are the most important to me. So
Hmm.
just kind of picking and choosing like, cool, I need to define what is the defining attributes of what interests me. Um, and so I think that was a large part of me on this journey too. My wife and I, maybe 2 years ago or so, started praying that like God would just be involved in my work and be a part of it. And so that's kind of the journey. I think you know Mark was probably the actual person that fit like literally invited me, but I think there was a lot of forces just pulling me towards this project. So
Yeah, I like that. I like that it's relational. Honestly, most of the actors I've talked to so far, it's all been relational. It's like, oh, because so and so, or oh, because of
mhm.
this person. And I think that's just like the Lord, though. He's such a
Yeah,
relational God. I mean, I mean, our stories, we've all been influenced, of course, by scripture, of course, by preaching, all that, but it's really the relationships. So I really like that a lot. Um, so with all that being said, you're telling this important story, as you say, of Paul, and it's a big one. Ulysses, I
hmm,
interviewed him on Friday, and he said it best. He's like, Lauren, like, what Sunday service, what church service, when do you not hear something about Paul and what he's done be talked about?
yeah,
And he was talking about just the sheer like humbleness of receiving the role that he gets to play as Paul and the weight of all that. And I'm sure on the other side with production, you guys are carrying your own weight of sharing the story of Paul. And so I guess my question to you is how do you ensure that this vision, when it comes to cinematography, like how do you ensure that it stays biblical and historical, but yet shares this transitional story of Paul? Like what goes through your mind as you guys are getting ready to start filming?
yeah. I think that's a good question. I mean, really, we look at references. We look at things like The Chosen and
Mm-hmm.
ask ourselves like questions. Cool, what did they do wrong here? What could they have done better? What did they do right? Like, what do we want to imitate? What do we want to shy away from?
Mm-hmm.
So that's always a big tool, using references, and that goes into like non-Christian things too. Like
Mm-hmm.
the last time Santiago and I spoke, we were talking about the films Dune a lot, right? Just for like the visual reference of like, cool, do we want to incorporate some of this or some of this? And honestly, it all is and will happen in pre-production.
Mm-hmm.
Like those kind of things, like what are we trying to avoid? And from my perspective, it's a pretty simple thing. Like most of the work is being done, in like the authenticity side from like wardrobe. It's got to be the correct sets. I can help like by avoiding things and knowing what to look for and question things, or like if there's a piece of concrete on the ground, request that like, hey, can we cover up this concrete with dirt,
Mm-hmm.
right, or whatever it is. Um, but there's not a ton for me to do. I mean, I'm lucky in that sense that like I everybody else gets to build the thing that I look at.
Mm,
Um, and my job is to make it like into cinema, right? Make it like alter it. Don't make it reality. Make it different and give it like those qualities that our eyes don't see. You know, you make
mhm.
the lighting, um, you know, slightly better than it would be in reality, right? And you have to draw a line somewhere, right? It could be
Right.
perfect lighting every time, and seem really weird, right? If you know Ulysses is walking outside and he always has like a really nice dark side and really nice key light and like an incredible backlight all the time, like no matter what direction he turns and looks. And we could do that, and that would be a style choice. So I guess in there, like Santiago and I have talked about, like we don't want to get too far from like reality. We don't want it to be surreal.
Mhm.
Um, but other than that, it's like, you put things out of focus and you make it beautiful. And really my job is to just like make sure that the good things get seen, so.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I like that. It's true. I think I like what you said. Like you're seeing the things you wouldn't normally see. Um,
Mhm.
that's so good because there's just little subtleties that can make all the difference, right? And so I think that's really neat that that's what's going through your brain. Okay, we don't need to see concrete. We don't need to see 21st century stuff. We're in first century, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like creating that and making sure it's maintained. I think is really neat. How do you plan on maybe trying to capture the visual transformations, or maybe there's conversations you and Santiago have had about how are we trying to capture this transformation that Paul took, and show that, through cinema?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard question. I think first we have to define like what are the big moments, and I think the
Mhm.
biggest one that we've talked about is just when Paul encounters God.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, Paul is so interesting because he's not like one of the 12 disciples,
Right.
and he's really unlike any other like major writer in the New Testament, in the fact that he didn't have direct contact with Jesus. So in my mind, he's a lot more relational. Like he's a lot easier to relate to, than like the disciples, because obviously he was in a different time period, but he's in the same shoes that I am in terms of just he was a normal person, that wasn't like touched by Jesus directly. Um,
Mhm.
but I think with all that being said, like the event when he like is I don't know if I'm pretty sure actually it's not like biblically in the Bible that he was riding a horse,
Mhm.
or on horseback, but we've talked about probably he's on horseback whenever he encounters God, and then he goes blind. And so I think that's the biggest event. And we're not 100% sure how like visually we want to achieve that. And I think we have a couple options. We'd love to do it all like real, like in camera, and not do it with visual effects.
Mhm.
Um, and it's kind of like a weird place where you get to this fine line of like what's going to become cheesy and
Right.
odd and strange,
Mhm.
because it's God. So my inclination is that like something simple and, um, kind of take the approach of like less is more is a good
Right.
idea, but
Mhm.
it'll probably just be like blinding light, um, that we use to represent God. And then, I mean, other than that, we'll do some things, like with lighting and stuff, like maybe try to make him like glow a little bit more and like vignette everything else around him. Like, so like potentially he's brighter than everything else. And the cool thing is we get to play with a little bit of the surreal, world there. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think that is the challenge, right? Because when the supernatural takes place, it's supernatural, and it's hard
mhm.
to mimic supernatural things.
Yeah.
And you want to do it in a way that also is is relatable and realistic. Like there's just
Hmm.
a weird balance, I would think, of that. And so yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear simple is more. And I think that's always true. I don't know if you ever can really go wrong with simple is more. I think it's just like you said, keeping that fine balance. So I've always envisioned Paul on horseback because I was like, he wouldn't have been walking at that point in his life. He was higher than
Yeah.
everybody else. So I love that
Yeah.
you that's something you guys are saying. I pictured him. That's exactly how I pictured him, like either on
Mm.
horse or and probably not donkey because donkey was lowly, but a horse or something. He
Yeah.
was
Or a
riding. He definitely
camel
had a
or yeah.
ride. Yeah, and he
Yeah.
had to like come down. Yeah. Yeah.
But he was, yeah, like the Romans were definitely used horses more
Hmm.
than camels. So yeah.
But I can picture, I think it's also really neat to see he physically came down. It's a physical
Hmm.
coming down, but a spiritual humbling as well. I think that just that
Yeah.
imagery is really powerful. And to show from being this high priest who thought he had it all together and was doing all the right things, and to going from that lofty place to being submissive to Jesus. And so I think it's really
Hmm.
neat that you guys are talking about using that imagery there. Um, are there any particular scenes in the future? And I know like not all the scripts have been written full, right? They've only written so much, but like, is there something you're hoping or excited to capture about Paul's story?
Mm. Um, Not in particular, not like one scene that I can think of. I mean,
Mm.
I guess more than anything, I'm excited about like kind of like the actions that Paul does, like in the different places that he goes. 'Cause, I mean, Paul traveled so much, so just like portraying that journey,
Mm,
and it probably won't be something like budgetarily that we'll get to really explore in the first couple episodes.
right.
But I mean, Paul was on boats a lot, and he was in prison, and he probably traveled a lot, like on horseback or donkey, and but he traveled great distances. But I mean, he saw a lot of places too. So it's just to go back to comparing to the Chosen. If you think about the Chosen is in very similar settings
Hmm.
a lot, and Paul's journey is not like that. Like he begins, like and just keeps going around the revolving door. I mean, of just like Greece, Rome,
Right.
like some of the outlying like provinces and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting you said that because I've not really thought about that, but I've known like I think he traveled like 12,000 miles or something is estimated over his
yeah,
missionary journeys, which is insane because he didn't have a car. You know, like we think
yeah,
12,000 miles is a lot, but like for them that was unheard of.
hmm,
And so, in fact, Ulysses mentioned to me, some people think, some scholars think that he was bow-legged because he walked so much,
mm,
which is very fascinating thing to think about. And you're like, oh,
yeah,
that actually kind of makes sense. So yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a challenge for you guys because to try to, like you said, the chosen, they're in similar scenes, right? It's all in
hmm,
Judea, it's all in like Galilee, Jerusalem, all these areas that look very similar. This is completely geographically different, culturally
yeah,
different. It's a challenge, and
hmm.
I'm excited to see the future about that. Um, is there any I'm guess to shift gears a little bit to get more personal to you. Is there any particular part of Paul's story that's resonated with you personally that's just maybe changed your life?
Um, I don't know particularly if there is. I mean, I'm really somebody that's like my wife could tell you kind of bad at these kind of questions. Like I'm not the person that like self reflects a lot. I'm usually the
Yeah.
person that's like, okay, I need to move on to the next thing to take my mind off of the thing that I should be self reflecting on.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, no, not particularly. I mean, I think just some of his like his challenges are pretty shocking and strike me a lot
Mhm.
if I do think about them. Even like uh, Santiago and I were talking about like Stephen getting stoned,
Mhm.
things like that, just like the physical trials that they endured and like the discomfort versus like our lives is like so insane. Like we complain about, if it's hot outside, and we get the reprieve of air conditioning, probably 90% of our lives if we want it. Whereas, somebody like that, it's like they daily sweat. And I mean, I'm sure Paul took a bath, once a month, so just
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. In fact, I just did a reel about that yesterday. Just talking about how our Matt Chandler says that our God is a God of comfort in our generation. I mean, like our
Hmm.
little G God is what I want to mean.
Yeah,
Our idol is comfort, and
yeah.
that the God we serve, the heavenly, Father, he's not about comfort. He's about, our spiritual eternal time with him and what that looks like, and sometimes that means being uncomfortable. And I think when you say that, Paul was a very uncomfortable man. He
Hmm.
lived in uncomfort, but yet he tells us in his, when he would pen words like, I have found contentment in all things. And it's like, you know um it's Ulysses brought it up the other day. He's like, "What do you do with the guy that's like, hey, if you beat me, good. That means I get to go to
Yeah.
heaven. And if you don't beat me and I'm here, if I kill you, kill me, I go to heaven. If I not, like I'm here, and that's great too. I'm gonna preach to the prisoners. Like, what do you do with that
Hmm.
guy that's found contentment in all things?" And so I think it's gonna be really neat to capture him, but showing the hardship of the man of Paul, because at the end of the day, he was just like you said, he's just like you and me. He struggled. It wasn't
Yeah.
perfect, but he struggled. But how did he get to that contentment? I'm excited to see how you guys show that in his story, for sure. So I'm gonna start wrapping us up because we've been
Okay.
having an amazing chat. I've enjoyed this so much, honestly, I really have. But in 60 seconds or less, what would you say to someone, like if you were trying to encourage them to watch this? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say anything specifically about like our production. And I would probably tell them something more general and say, like it's something that I've thought about a lot whenever I'm making a film. What is this something that that I would show my children or that I would want my wife to watch? You know, and I would just think about that. Like think about media and how you consume it and like what you're looking at. Like, do you want, your spouse to see it? Would you watch it with your parents? If it's something that like, if things that you're watching are something that like you don't want other people to see, there's probably something wrong with that. And it's a strange thing. I think that's the best part about making a show like this is it's literally the best thing you could be watching is something that's about God, even if it doesn't turn out, to be like perfect in terms of theology or something like that. It's still something that is pushing for your focus to be on God rather than to take it away from Him. So.
Mhm. I like that so much. I think there's been a pushback. People want it to be 100% biblically accurate. What wasn't said in the Bible.
Hmm.
Why are you taking creative leaps to do that? And it's like, but I think if people take a step back, it's like, but this is pushing you toward your faith in the Lord.
Yeah.
And we're not doing anything to unfame or disfame or try to take away from scripture. Scripture is scripture. We want to point you to
Hmm.
scripture. And if we're doing that, then we're doing our job. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I agree with you and would resonate that if you wanted to be 100% biblical, read the Bible. And I think all these shows like The Chosen, things like that, that's what they're pointing you towards. And
mhm,
really, at the end of the day, I know that's like Oscar, the creator's ultimate goal is he wants you to look at and read the Bible. And if you can have a tool like The Chosen or Paul the Last Apostle that can point people towards those stories, that's really the next step. And you can't really make a television show or a narrative series or anything like that doesn't take a little bit of creative liberty. It's a very difficult thing to do. So.
yeah, because you're only given so much.
Hmm.
You're given, like, it's kind of like if me and you were trying to make a film about ourselves based off our Instagram or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you had to fill in the blanks. Like there's
Yep.
not. It's just a
Yeah. There's
snapshot, and so
100%. Yeah. There's gaps in between, and there's like if we did it with Paul, literally it would just be Paul talking the whole time. That would be the whole show. Nobody else would speak really, so that would be pretty difficult to watch. So just be
right.
long monologues.
Yes, and you know what I love though? I love that we're providing cultural context to help us understand the Bible because it was written to a first century audience. in a different time, in a different place. And there's things that when he says something, meant something so much deeper than what you and I understand 2000 years later on this side, living in America, living with our own, and so we have
Mhm.
to, I think that's what's so beautiful. And I think The Chosen has done it well. And I'm excited because I think we're going to do it well with Paul. And I'm super excited because there's not a TV series on Paul. And this will be the first of many, of hopefully many more stories get told because you got The Chosen, they started, then it'll be us on Paul. Then hopefully somebody else will pick up, I think Moses came out recently. So like you're hoping to
Mm.
see this
Yeah.
because the Bible's cool and it has really cool stories, and some of the stories
Yeah.
are crazy.
Yeah.
So being able to share that's awesome. Well, Jordan, I appreciate you so much today for taking time and just chatting with me and letting people meet you guys that are working so hard behind the scenes. And for those of people who do not know, we are filming coming in August. It's going to be great. Casting calls are currently happening. So make sure you're checking that on our page. And please be following us for more. Next Friday, I will be with Mark Isaacs, who we've mentioned today. He's our producer, one of our producers, and we will be chatting at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So we will see you guys next Friday. Hope y'all have a great day.